Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For me, this has been a very long journey towards leaving the European Union. The European question has always been about who governs this country and how. The national interest is served by our democratic system of parliamentary government, which has evolved over centuries of our history. We make our own laws in this Parliament in line with the consent of the voters in general elections based upon the party manifestos. The government is chosen by virtue of those who win the most seats. It is also fundamental that our proceedings are both accountable and transparent. We have Hansard and all votes are recorded. Any voter can see the transcript and how their laws are made and voted upon in this Parliament. We must fully repeal the European Communities Act 1972 on the 29th of March, as the Withdrawal Act legislatively requires. That is why I agreed with the Prime Minister when she said at the Lancaster House speech that we would not have truly left the European Union if we are not in control of our own laws. This agreement does not do this, despite breathtaking assertions to the contrary. This may even be indefinite through the backstop and through the undemocratic procedures of the Council of Ministers. We would be indefinitely shackled, as Article 132 affirms, even up to 31st December, so they say 20XX. The decisions in that Council as to which laws we obey and changes to the rules, creating great uncertainty for business, will be decided by QMV or consensus by the other 27, behind closed doors. We will not be there. There will be no transcript and no reasons given as to how or why the laws imposed upon us will be arrived at. This alone is a reason why I'm voting against this withdrawal agreement. It is a denial of our democracy and therefore of the national interest. It defies the referendum vote and the Withdrawal Act itself, which repeals the European Communities Act 1972 and all the treaties and laws, including the single market and the customs union, which have been heaped upon us since we joined the European community itself in 1972-73. It is outrageous to suggest that what we are doing in rejecting this withdrawal agreement is undemocratic. This is pure Alice in Wonderland, Mr. Speaker, and turns the very notion of democracy and national interest upon its head. But that is not all. This agreement is not compromise, as the Attorney General suggested. It is capitulation, nor is it pragmatism. We are not purists. We are defending our democracy against servitude. Apart from control over our laws, there is the question of money, paying not merely £39 billion, but far more for nothing. We will lose the rebate. Then there is the role of the European Court of Justice. There is the issue of our not being able to trade independently outside the clutches of the European Commission. We have prodigious opportunities to create prosperity and to provide the revenue for the payment of our public services and by trading with on our own terms with other countries in the world through the Anglosphere and the Commonwealth. There is also the question of the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. There are the state aids in this withdrawal agreement, which would give a power of veto to the European Union over our incentives in relation to ports, industrial development as well, which will be one of our primary means of attracting foreign direct investment. Bear in mind also that in the European Union we run a deficit in the single market on goods of around £95 billion a year, whereas Germany hides behind the euro with a surplus of £140 billion a year with the EU 27. Sir Paul Lever, our former British ambassador to Germany, said recently in his book Berlin Rules, the EU, he said, is geared principally to the defence of German national interest. He explains, as I did in my own book Against the Federal Europe in the 1990s, early 1990s, that there will be a German Europe. He shows that no decisions, including those relating to the negotiations for the withdrawal agreement, were decided by the Commission or by other member states without the prior agreement of Germany itself. Why on earth would anyone want to remain? The EU does not work for the UK, nor the EU itself, with youth unemployment in countries such as Italy, Greece and France of between 20 and 50%. They are utterly disillusioned with the austerity imposed by the German-led fiscal compact. Hungary and Poland and other countries in Central Europe are in revolt, and even Sweden and Denmark have moved to the right. So what is it that makes these reversers in this House believe that we should remain in this imploding, undemocratic European Union whose economic foundations are in tatters as the euro stagnates? Why on earth do they believe that a new people's vote is needed when we had one enacted by Act of Parliament in the House of Commons and voted for by most of those now trying to unravel the Withdrawal Act, and despite every Conservative having endorsed the referendum vote in our manifesto? As I argued some months ago, our system is one of parliamentary government, not government by Parliament. Government by Parliament would be anarchic. So we are faced not only with a constitutional crisis, but also with a massive breach of public trust as a party and as a parliament. Up to the time of the Chequers proposals, I was fully prepared to support the government. But on the 6th of July, my trust in the government and the Prime Minister was completely lost. I asked her on the 9th of July how could she reconcile Chequers with the repeal of the European Communities Act 1972, and I got no reply. In the debate the next week, I stressed that the 80-page white paper setting out those proposals and now intrinsic to the withdrawal agreement had been pre-planned for probably up to a year. I explained it would unravel the European Communities Act 1972, that this was a gross misleading of Parliament. Indeed, the Chequers meeting itself bounced the Cabinet in breach of collective responsibility and in breach of the Ministerial Code. All of this amounts to a monstrous breach of constitutional and public trust. This brings me to what happens next, which, as I believe, this withdrawal agreement will be consigned to the grave of history. Far from members of Parliament, as the Prime Minister has asserted, voting for this agreement, it is our duty to vote against it. We will not have effectively left the European Union if we do not. We will also be undermining our Westminster system of government, depriving ourselves of monumental opportunities of global trading on our own terms, and with our friends in the United States who are so disillusioned with this agreement, and the same applies to other members of the Commonwealth. As Churchill once said, and as I was reminded at the time of Maastricht by my constituents, we should put our country first, our constituency second, our party third. Tragically, our Prime Minister became leader of our party by coronation and not by the will of the party membership. They, by all the recent evidence, are profoundly against this withdrawal agreement. We then had the deeply unsatisfactory outcome of the last general election. I simply say, therefore, that now is the time to walk away from this European Union. The expression no deal is a misnomer. It is not a default position. It is what the Act of Parliament endorsing the Lisbon Treaty actually specifies. There must be no extension of time, as the European Union so-called number 2 bill, which has been introduced by the member for Grantham, indicates. And I am glad that the Prime Minister reaffirmed to me yesterday that this is the case. It will achieve nothing. I would strongly urge the government, therefore, after this vote is cast tonight, to conclude that enough is enough and that we have reached the journey's end. Now is the time to walk away from the intransigence of the European Union and our failed policy of seeking to supplicate their guidelines, their terms and their paymasters. We witnessed similar events in May 1940, when the then Prime Minister actually won the vote on the Norway debate, but on reflection concluded that he had to resign because he had lost the confidence of Parliament as a whole. I believe, therefore, there are lessons in this for the Prime Minister to consider her position and to do so with dignity and without rancour.